Hi, this is Matt Johnson with Vyral Marketing. Thanks so much for joining us. This is the latest installment of the Sales and Prospecting Training Hangout with Bill Crespo, and so I'm excited to have Bill with us today. Bill, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Real excited about today with Dr. Abelson. So we're going to be having some great conversations. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, this is going to be a great one. I've been looking forward to this for quite a while, and if you guys have any questions, just submit them right through the Q&A app, and I'm going to bring them to Michael and Bill, and let's kick it off, Bill.
Yeah. Well, great. Listen, thanks for everybody showing up today. This is going to be a great one. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Michael Abelson. He's a friend of mine. We've known each other for some time. He's been a proponent of coaching. And Dr. Abelson, just give him a little bit of your background because it's very interesting, your background and how it relates to sales. Can you give a little bit of background on what you're doing?
Sure. I've been involved in consulting and working with organizations since the late 70s, believe it or not. I actually ran a crisis center in the mid 70s, so I'm fairly used to people that are going through crisis with being entrepreneurial and dealing with all different types of issues.
Right.
I have I believe an interesting background as far as my education is concerned, with a master's in clinical psych as well as an MBA and PhD in business management. But more important to the audience is the types of experiences that we've had and types of ways that our clients benefit from what it is that we do. We have over 2,000 accounts in the U.S. and Canada. Some are actually international. But it's fun for us to help people identify the right people to hire. It's always fun to help them be more effective coaches. It's fun to show them how to more effectively interact with and work with people in any type of venue that they're involved in, whether it be personal, professional, volunteer, whatever. People are people. And we also do quite a bit of organization work where we do strategic planning and change management. And we've helped huge organizations change as well as helping individuals change with some of our programs. So that, in a nutshell, is the background. And Bill, we've known each other for a number of years now, so I'm really excited to be in the program today and involved in the future with things that we're going to be doing together.
Yeah, this is exciting. You know, it's because so many years, remember, first of all, everybody who's in sales needs to know what a DiSC is. So we're going to go over DiSC. But remember, they used to, in the old days, it was like you were a leopard, a lion, a lamb. And then you remember those days, and I'm trying to figure out what animal I was. In the meantime, DiSC came around, and now it was so much easier to understand what I was and I am, and then how I'm going to relate to the client. But DiSC, briefly tell us what DiSC is.
Well, DiSC is a behavioral profile. If you're interacting with somebody and they talk about DiSC and they say it's a personality profile, they really don't know what they have, because personalities are much more complex than the DiSC, because we're very, very complicated. Now, one of the unfortunate things about DiSC itself is actually the concepts were created all the way back in 440 BC, but a guy by the name of Marston in 1928 wrote a book that brought it to modern day usage. And brilliant guy. In addition to doing the DiSC, he created the Wonder Woman concept. He actually created the lie detector, but he wasn't a very good business person, and he didn't protect his intellectual property. So there are dozens and dozens of DiSCs out there with different formulations. So just because you've taken a DiSC doesn't mean that you've taken a good one or one that's very accurate. And we didn't create the DiSC that we use, so we can use anyone in the marketplace. It just so happens that every couple of years I go back out to re-examine what's happening in the marketplace, and we keep on coming back to the same company as far as using their DiSC and other assessments. And we are actually one of their top, and have been one of their top distributors worldwide for the last 10 years. Relationships like yours.
Tell me, I know you said Wonder Woman. I got confused there. What happened to Wonder Woman here? I just want to know, what was that with DiSC? What went on there?
Marston created the Wonder Woman concept. Okay, so Wonder Woman was his personal creation. Okay, and it's interesting when you talk to the family of the Wonder Woman concept, of the lie detector, or of DiSC, they are the proudest that he invented Wonder Woman, which is weird.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
But that's his family, and then that's what they're the proudest of. Even though
I did not know that. This is
every year.
This is good stuff. So now, a couple confusions, things that are confusing with me with DiSC. And so you have a DiSC, and I know people are using different companies. We probably won't mention any names, but I see a disparaging situation. I see gaps in different DiSCs or margins that change dramatically. Consistent margin changes. You know, where there's a 20-point difference here and there. What makes a good DiSC?
Well, there are a number of things. One of them is you want to make sure that the results are consistent, but they also need to be valid or accurate. Okay? So, because people, and here's a myth that deals with DiSC, some people say that your DiSC won't change. That's wrong. Right? People's behaviors change. I mean, what is coaching about?
Yeah,
okay?
Yeah.
Coaching is about helping people change their behavior,
Yeah.
right? And modify it. So what a good DiSC will do is it will pick up the different aspects of somebody's behavior. Now, one of the neat things about ours, our DiSC actually looks at 384 different behavioral sets. Okay? Now, the next closest one in accuracy looks at 24. So it's 384 versus 24. I mean, what's going to be more accurate? Another thing which is really important, and not so much important in coaching, but it's very important in hiring, is, especially in the U.S., it needs to be compliant with equal employment opportunity law, and you have to be able to demonstrate that there is no adverse impact. We don't have to get into legal aspects of this, but there is no adverse impact if you use the assessment in hiring. And to date, to the best of my knowledge anyway, the DiSC that we use is the only DiSC in the marketplace that has demonstrated statistics that it will not discriminate and does not discriminate. So it's important that you use it. Now, what's real important in everybody's case is if it's the only one that can demonstrate that it doesn't discriminate, that also gives us a little bit more information that it's probably the most accurate one on the market. So when it comes to using DiSC, is it better to use something that's cheap or better than using something that's accurate? Obviously, you're going to be making decisions, and when you're coaching somebody, it's going to have thousands and thousands of dollars of impact on what it is that they do. So what's a couple dollars difference when you're purchasing an assessment that's going to be much more accurate? It's craziness to me that people will be concerned about the cost of an assessment when it's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars, and in most cases, at least, it's going to cost them at least a couple $1,000s when they're wrong, okay, by using an inaccurate DiSC.
Okay, so this is a great point. By using an inexpensive DiSC, it can cost you $1,000 because the hire was wrong, right? You got the wrong hire, and there you're spending all this money on salary. And this is what I'm seeing a lot with clients at times. They're picking this person and making the wrong assessment based on the DiSC that was inexpensive. That's critical.
Yes, and another thing is too, and we do this with as many clients as will allow us to, it's important to look at what are the characteristics that are closest to success for that position. And we have two different ways and two different processes of identifying the exact characteristics that will match effectiveness on the job. And what we do is we use the DiSC for that, but we also use a couple other different assessments that look at different sciences because, again, behaviors is not the only thing that is going to be equated with performance.
So do you the information that's provided, so we get a link, it goes in, then all that data is going into even another assessment at times, so that you can only go in once and then it gets spread into the other software or the other programs. Is that how it works?
Yes, it can work that way, right? So when you have an account with us, you can have an account that includes the DiSC assessment. You can have one that includes the DiSC and our motives assessment. You can have one that includes the DiSC behaviors, our motives assessment, and emotional intelligence. There's various different accounts you can have with us, and depending on how we set up the account for you, that depends on the assessment that you're going to give somebody. Now, we can have a client can set up multiple accounts, and they can choose what they want the person to take. So if they only want the person to take the DiSC, then they can give them the password that goes with that account. If they want them to take the DiSC and the motives and the emotional intelligence, they can give them the password that goes with that account, okay, and then they can get whichever report they want in that particular case. We're also so flexible that let's say somebody has an account with us and they just have the DiSC, and then they want the motives and or they want the emotional intelligence as well. Fine, we'll set up a separate account and they can do just that one assessment, And again, we're getting back to the point that I made at the beginning of our conversation, and that is people are more complicated than just our behaviors. Our personalities are much more complicated, and that's why you can have two people that seem to have the same DiSC when you look even at the numbers on the graphs, okay? But they're different people because it's not just behaviors.
So I just dropped my pen. So can a person change? And you just said something really important. So it's almost like I always tell people, they'll say, I'm a high I, and everybody talks about drivers being the sales guy, and some of these people think they need a handicap sticker at Walmart because they're high I's and they can't be a good salesperson. So I guess my question is, it's good to know what you are, but that doesn't handicap you. You can be versatile enough to kind of go across profiles. The different DiSCs. Can you go over, like, if I'm a heavy D, if I have enough versatility, can I be an I? Can I be an S? Can I be a C? Can someone actually move into those other traits?
Well, that's one of the beauties of using the DiSC assessment, because you can see what the other person is as well, and you know how to interact with them. We have a couple of programs, in fact, that show you how to determine not only what you are, obviously you take the assessment, but we have programs where you can either take the assessment or we can show you how to identify in a very global way what their behavior style is. I mean, if you understand the DiSC, you can probably figure out, you can get as deep as 8 or maybe 12 or 16 different of our 384 different behavioral sets just by looking at them and interacting with them. So you want to do that. For example, I mean, I'm talking fairly quickly right now, so what you're seeing is a D with an I behavior because I have intensity and I have interactiveness and those types of things. But if I'm talking with someone who is more of an S style or a steadiness style, it makes sense for me to slow down a little because they're going to feel more comfortable with me slowing down than if I'm going 100,000 miles an hour. Okay, so it's important to realize that, and as a coach and when you're hiring and interacting with anybody, it's important to know that. I mean, you're in the street. It's interesting. When I go to conferences, people come up to me and they ask me, well, can you figure out what I am? Well, yeah, and anybody who's watching this, can figure out globally what somebody is, and you just need to practice, because what you want to do, no matter who you're interacting with and whatever the purpose, you want to have a connection with them. You want them to feel comfortable with you, so you need to adapt your behavior to that point. Now, the issue becomes, when you're under stress, okay, or when you're acting as you are naturally, that's more difficult to change and to modify. But our adaptive behavior, hopefully you can do that fairly quickly.
So, do we have any questions yet, Matt? I'll just, if not, I got a really important question. The question is, when someone is under stress, I get this question a lot. Do you present to their stressed personality, or do you go to their original personality that came up on the DiSC?
It depends on what I want done.
What's that?
If I want the stress behavior because that's what I need. I mean, there's all kinds of research that demonstrates a little bit of conflict or anxiety is a good thing because it helps motivate people. Well, when you have a little bit of that, some of that natural behavior, that comes out, so the stress behavior comes out. Well, if that's the behavior that you want, then that's a good thing. Okay? If you would rather have how they've adapted, then you want to do things that are going to make them feel more comfortable and behave in the adapted way. Now, there are some people whose natural and adaptive is very similar, so it doesn't matter. But there are some people whose natural and adaptive is fairly different. Okay, so depending on the environment or depending on how you interact with them is going to have an impact on the type of behavior you're going to get from them.
So for salespeople, they're going to someone's house. It's a stressful thing for them to sell their house. So the lady who was just sweet and nice turns into this driver maniac. And then, so do I get up there with her as a driver, or do I go back down to what she was when I first met her? How do I address her? Should I bring her down, or should I stick with her and then pace her down? What should I do?
Well, my recommendation is to be with them in the moment. Okay? And they are what you're seeing. All right, they're not somebody else, all right, and that's one of the interesting things about this too. People say, well, I don't like my behavior, I have to change my behavior. People don't like me because of that. Well, you need to look at what your strengths are. Let's get back to your situation though. All right, in that type of situation, if they're acting, very, very aggressively, then I would sit back and let them in psychology is called catharting. I would let them express and blow off their steam, okay,
Right.
regarding it, and then when they stop, interact. I mean, I wouldn't get in a competition with them. You know what happens when two D behaviors type of clash? It's like two rams. They go head to head. Now, if
Right.
you want to lose the client, that's one thing. If you're an attorney and you want to antagonize somebody, then you want to get in their face. But
Right.
if and now, don't get me wrong, not all attorneys want to antagonize people.
Yeah.
Some people,
No,
some
they
attorneys,
do.
that they're not litigators, so they're not interested in doing that. Okay, but depending on what your goals are, will have an impact on how you interact with them.
Good. So here's what I'm thinking. When a client comes in, I like to know from a coaching standpoint, I want to know their DiSC.
Right.
And when someone is under stress, when you look at the adaptive and the natural,
Right.
how do I know that there's something going on? I mean, what are the indicators when the DiSC comes back? I see this. Is there a spread is really yours? If someone gives me a spread on yours, I go, oh my gosh, something's going on. How do I decipher that?
Okay, now, just because there's a difference between the natural and adaptive, okay, in the graphs or on the wheel, it doesn't mean something negative is going on.
Okay.
Okay? The only thing that it will mean is that it's going to take more energy for them to perform at the adaptive behavioral style.
Okay.
Okay? So it's a more energy thing. And what I tell people is, that adaptive style might be exactly what you want. Okay? Right. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. All right? Now, what will happen is when somebody, the greater that spread between the natural and adaptive, and it's easiest to see it on the wheel, okay, which is another differentiating factor for our assessment regarding any other DiSC out there. Ours is the only DiSC that has a geometrically proportioned wheel, which means that the further their symbols are from each other, the further are their behaviors, both naturally and adaptive. And the same thing happens with the team. But let me get back to your situation. So let's say somebody is at 10 o'clock on the wheel, naturally, and they've adapted to be at like 3 o'clock on the wheel, and they're fairly outside, again, on the wheel, all right? Because the more outside they are, the more intense their behaviors are.
Outside being on the rim, on the edges of the rim. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yes, on the rim. Okay, now, they're going to have to exert a lot of energy to maintain the behaviors at the 3 o'clock area because they're more naturally at 10, and that's what comes comfortable to them and they love to do. Right. Doesn't mean they can't do it. All right? Now, if they're in that position for a while, they might start to burn out. Okay? That's a type of profile where somebody can do that for 40 hours or 35 hours a week for a long time. Okay? Right. But if you're requiring them to do it 50, 60, 70 hours a week, then the more intensity or the more energy they have to exert, the greater their likelihood to burn out is. So that's where that factor comes in. Again, it's not that they can't do it. It's just it takes more energy to be successful at doing it.
Got it. And what you just made, I like the fact what you said about energy because they could get burned out so quickly. So they're in a position that they feel a little stressed in, right? When you're saying more energy, it could also lead to stress, right?
Oh yeah, well it will lead to stress. Okay, eventually. Okay, because I mean, let me give you an example. I was working with two people in an engineering environment. It's a huge organization, so I'm not going to tell you anything more about the organization, but they're engineers. Well, naturally, they're at 10 o'clock on the wheel. Adaptively, they're at 3 o'clock on the wheel. Okay, and they were both in administrative position. They were both very good at it. So when I first showed them the report, I looked at them and I said, are you guys happy when the weekend comes? And they looked at each other, they smiled. Okay, then they looked at me and they smiled and they looked confused and then they said, well why? How come, yeah, you're right, but how did you know that and why are you asking? And I said, well, gentlemen, I know you're both very good administratively, right? But what's happening is your natural style is very different from your administrative style, so you have to exert a lot of energy. So when the weekend comes, you're kind of like wiping your brow and saying, wow, I'm glad the weekend is here because now I can regenerate my batteries over the weekend and recharge myself and start all over again on Monday. Okay, well, they can do that. But, I mean, if you require them to do that for 60 or 70 hours a week for month on and month out and year in and year out, I mean, we're talking about some high stress levels that are going to get involved here.
Yeah, I love it. So, Matt, we're good? Do we have anybody with questions yet?
Yeah, not from the audience yet. I mean, it just from my perspective, looking at working with coaches, a lot of real estate coaches in particular, is that has to be a very key thing to know going in when you're dealing with somebody and their natural and adaptive styles are very, very different. That
Yes.
energy gap is huge because then you have to adjust all of your coaching to match their realistic energy levels of how long they can spend prospecting if that's outside their comfort zone,
Exactly.
how long they can spend on the administrative side. I mean, speak to that a little bit of your experience working with clients. I mean, that has to be just a revelation.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great conversation because if we have a or like a salesperson who is working with buyers and they've got to push their eye up, let's just say. Dr. Abelson, they got to push their eye up all week long. If as a leader, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, if I don't give them a break, these people are going to break. In other words, if I notice that on my team, I've got let's say a guy who's adapting to do a high I with buyer's agents, let's just say hypothetically, and then he's just stressed, he's pushing that thing up, and then I don't give him a break or I don't notice it. And
Right.
we lose that person who could have been a good person if we gave him a break. Could that happen where we don't see that and also we lose a good person? He could be okay throughout the week, but we don't give him a break, we could lose a good person, couldn't we?
Yeah, you could, because what happens is that, they get really stressed out. I mean, ideally what you want is you want to have somebody who's natural and adaptive, is fairly close to each other, and those are the types of behaviors that you want in that position. Okay, that's ideal, but you don't always have the ideal situation. Right now, a couple comments regarding that. Just because somebody isn't ideal doesn't mean that you have to fire them. You might be able to move them into another position in the organization, okay, that is closer to what their natural style is, which will automatically reduce their stress level as their adapted style changes and they start moving closer to what their natural style is.
Got it.
Okay. The other aspect is that's one of the benefits of having a team, because what you do is you figure out what somebody's strengths are. You have them do the things that rely on their strengths, okay? And then what happens is you let other people do things that rely on their strengths, all right? And what you do is you keep away from what the weaknesses are or from what's causing them to have the stress that's going to lead to burnout. Again, remember, all stress isn't bad, okay? A little stress is good, and a lot of research demonstrates that I mean, a country club type environment is not necessarily the best type of environment to have, okay? To have a little, that's one of the reasons that people set up goals and they try to motivate people to create a little tension so they'll be more motivated. And the trick is to figure out what's motivational for people. The other trick, okay, is to figure out what you can do to release the tension. For example, people who are intense Ds, to deal with the stress, they typically do some type of physical activity.
Right.
Whether it's going out, whether it's playing golf, whether it's working out, or whatever.
Right.
Okay. People who are Cs typically want some alone time where they can think things out.
Right.
Okay. Well, if you're a D and you're going to take the C behavioral style, okay, and force them to be energetic to work things out, you're putting more stress on them instead of relieving the stress.
Right.
Okay, because they need alone time where they can just relax and think about it because that's their comfort zone. So it's important to realize those things, and we have training programs to show people how to do that, okay, and to help them out. Another thing that I want to just mention briefly at this point, we might come back to it later, is we have a team report which is exceptional because what we do is we take their scores from their individual online DiSC, and their motives assessment, because we have a team report for DiSC behaviors and for what motivates them and what they value, okay? And then we take the data from their individual report, and we take everybody who's on that team, and we put them into some other special software, and we print out a team report that shows them what the team's strengths and weaknesses are, and it shows you where the strengths and weaknesses of the team, not just what the strengths and weaknesses are of individuals on the team.
And how they interact.
Exactly, and it's awesome. And it shows you how to more effectively interact with each other, okay? And you don't even have to have questions. You don't have any questions about the team. We just take their individual responses, and we know how people are going to interact with each other. It's an awesome report. So every time you set up another team, you should do another team report and share it with the team so you can come up with a plan on what people's strengths and weaknesses are, how to focus and maximize their strengths, how to minimize or keep away from their weaknesses, and how to help them be much more effective.
Yeah, to the clients that are out there listening, can you see how effective this could be for your team if you start to understand the DiSC? Better hires, better team interaction, and remember what Dr. Abelson said: stress is good. So and the market is hot.
We don't want to have too much stress here,
No,
Bill.
not too much stress. Listen, stress. Of
Sweet
course,
spot.
a D's saying this, right? A D's saying stress is good. So what I'm saying to you is the fact that the market is shifting, where we're going to see more people working harder. And I'm telling the clients right now that this is, get it while it's hot. Now, the question I have on the admin side of it, and I want you to explain a little bit about the C. We've got teams that are hiring administrative people, and if I'm correct, Dr. Abelson, is it true that too high of a C, they're not able to work without true direction all the time? Is that correct? If it's too high, if you want someone to work for me as an executive assistant who could think on their feet, is it important for that? How high should the C be? Let's just say.
Well, that's where we get into this notion of you shouldn't just look at one science or one approach to looking at people. Okay? For example, another assessment that we have that is becoming much more popular and more people are using looks at 6 primary motives for people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And one of them is called traditional, and people who are traditional have to have structure. All right? One of them is individualistic, okay, who like to take responsibility and like to take control, so they like to do different things. So if you have somebody who has high C or intense C type behaviors, they're very detailed, very quality oriented, okay, they like to have the rules and regulations, but they're also individualistic, okay, where they like to create the rules, you're going to have a much more flexible person than if you had somebody who's an intense C but is also very traditional. If they're very traditional with that intense C, then it is by the book. All right, you need to give them the rules. But again, if they have that individualistic or one of the other motives, okay, that's underlying the behavior, then they could be more flexible in their thinking and their behaviors and what they do and how they approach things.
Would it be a lower C or will it be a real high C? Do you think?
It could be a high C. But but if they're individualistic, they're very detail-oriented, they're very quality-oriented, okay? They're very, pessimistic, they like asking questions, but they also like to come up with their own ways of dealing with the issue. Yeah. Okay, so they're flexible in thinking. That's where the individualistic aspect comes in. But if they're, very detailed, very quality, very pessimistic, and it's got to be by the book, all right, then you need to give them that structure. It's kind of like playing baseball. Okay, right. You can have an outfielder who understands the constraints and where they need to be, and there's certain areas of the field they need to be in. Okay, but if they're an outfielder and they're very individualistic, you need to give them some freedom to make some decisions. If they're high traditional, then what you do is you come up with all different types of scenarios. When this batter comes up, this is where you need to stand. When this batter comes up, this is where you need to stand. Okay. If they're really on and they're going to be hitting it long because that's what they've done earlier in the game, then this is where you need to stand. That's going to be an intense C who is also high traditional. Okay. Yeah. So it depends on a couple things. You can't stereotype all intense Cs. Again, we have 384 different levels for all of things, okay, for all behaviors. That means there's 96 different levels of C just by itself, okay?
Gosh, that's scary.
The most they're going to come up with is 6 different descriptors for C, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and Bill, I can see the role is even changing over time.
Oh yeah.
Because if you're talking about someone that has high flexibility, high individualistic, they'll be perfect for a startup team, a startup company, or a small sales team where all the roles are changing and morphing all the time.
Right. Yeah.
But as soon as those roles are set, then all of a sudden you're looking for somebody that's high traditional because you don't want them breaking all the rules. You worked the years of pain it took to figure out the best way to do things, and then have somebody want to come in and change things right off the bat.
I'll have a heart attack in your office, and
exactly.
So let's look at.
Let me give you an example that goes with that. Okay. Yeah, you have a call center type of situation,
right?
Okay, where you want them to go by scripts. Well, if they're high traditional, they love the scripts. If they're high individualistic, they can't stand them. They don't like to be pinned down. They want to have the flexibility to use to make their own decisions.
Which is part of why I'm sure, Bill, you run into this a lot in the process of building sales teams. You're trying to bring somebody in at a lower level, like an inside sales assistant.
Right.
sometimes the things that will make them eventually a great individual salesperson makes them a horrible ISA, or means they can only do it for a very short period of time, and then you better be prepared to move them into more responsibility. Otherwise, you're going to lose them.
And what's the beauty of the DiSC, and I'll get into from a coaching standpoint. I love it when my coaches, my clients, are now sending me the DiSC, and I've committed to Dr. Abelson that I'm going to learn this thing at a higher level, because to me it's completely fascinating, and helps me to understand what some of the difficulties are with the team, positioning the ISAs, and everything else that needs to be positioned in the team. Now, the question I have for Dr. Abelson is on a salesperson. When you look at sales, I'm a sales guy, and now I'm a D. I'm an I, an S, or a C. So what are some of the things that I have to be looking for in my style, or whatever I am, to be careful of? What do I have to be careful of in sales? If I'm a high D guy, or high I, high S, high C, what warnings, what things can you give us that will help us to be better at our craft, because we tend to lean on our style more?
Well, let me ask you a couple questions first, because there's all kinds of levels of sales.
Yeah.
Okay. Are these inside or outside salespeople?
Let's go outside first.
Okay, they're outside. Okay, do they have a concrete product, or is it an abstract product?
Let's say abstract, because we're selling a service like real estate or financial planning or even a mortgage lender. And the reason why I'm saying this, let me go back, is that when I'm doing my power prospecting workshop around the country, I'll get this D. Let me show you what I can do here, and let me close you. And then I'll do one little thing, and their brain goes into this comatose state, because I knew that he was going to challenge me. Right. And I come in with a question that throws them off. And my technique is to backdoor the sale instead of come in the front door. Ds like to come right in the front door and close. Right. So let's say it's mortgage lending, financial planning, or financial advising, or real estate. We'll go from there.
Okay, cool. All right, let's take a step back first. What you want to do in any sales position or approach is you want to create a relationship, especially if it's abstract.
Right.
Okay, they have to feel comfortable with you, because you have to create trust. All right, and that trust comes from communication and their perception of the communication. So the first thing you need to do, especially if you're a D, one of the issues with Ds is they think the world revolves around them. Okay, and we're going to go, I'm talking about a very, very intense D. Remember, there's 96 different levels. Okay, right. I'm talking about a very, very intense D, who on our wheel would be in space number 1. Okay, so for those of you out there that already use us, open a report or see where space 1 is. Okay, it's very intense D. Right, what needs to happen is they need to stop focusing on what works for them, and they need to focus on what they're seeing in the person in front of them. Okay, and they need to shift gears from what works for them to what works for the client, okay, or the customer. Mm-hmm. All right, and they need to form a connection, and there has to be this fit or matching, okay, as far as that behavioral style, because they have to feel comfortable with you. So if you're a D and you're working with another D, it's okay to be forceful. It's okay to be straight. It's okay to be right at them. Okay, but if you're dealing with an S, or which is the opposite behavioral style, and they're a fairly intense S, you have to ease back. You have to lean back. You can't be in their face. You need to give them space. You need to slow down. You need to look at one thing at a time, okay, instead of giving them too many things. I mean, a machine gun works fine with an intense D. They love that. A machine gun will blow the S away. Okay, so it's not good. All right, we can do the same thing if we're interacting with an I or if we're interacting with a C. What you want to lead with the I is talking with them, being friendly with them, talking about, what their day is like, getting into the emotionality of the relationship. When you're talking with a C and you want to connect with the C, you're going to talk about details. You're going to talk about, this is the detail of the product. This is the detail of our mortgage. This is the detail of the home that we're looking at. What are the important features for you, so I can make sure that I give you that information that you really want. Those types of approaches and things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Which brought another, Matt, I got to tell you, so I get these guys from New York that I'm coaching from New York. You love this. Dr. Abelson. So they go, hey, it's New York. People are all D's in New York, right? And they're just so D. And so I'm a D. So I said, okay, let's have a script. So I went like this. So I go ring. They go, hello. This is a FSBO. So I go, hello, and the guy goes, yeah, hello. Is this house still for sale? They go, yeah, we're going FSBO. And they goes, well, I don't care. I'm coming over. That's the script for FSBOs in New York. That's it. Right? And then the guy says, what do you mean you're coming over? I'm coming over. I don't need you. I don't care what you say. I'm still coming. That's a D script in New York because everybody's a D. They go, I keep getting my, Bill, you don't understand. It doesn't work like that. These scripts don't work. The nice scripts don't work in New York. We're different. I go, I grew up in the Bronx, so I knew what the heck they were talking about. But it is so funny when you go, and I just got back from Connecticut, and they go these things. So I said, okay, here's the script. Okay, I'm coming over. Bye. I don't care what you say. And that's a D script. So I love what you're saying because the more I look at scripts, I'm realizing that in the beginning we should stay neutral until we pick up the verbal and nonverbal cues, correct? So,
absolutely.
Okay, so give us some cues that we can find out in each one of these steps.
You need to be a sponge and just absorb it all and think about it and understand the different behavioral styles. And if you get really good, you can also start looking at the different motivational styles. Because, people make buying decisions, we all know, from emotion, not from logic. So, and the motives and the values hit much more into the emotionality of somebody, okay, and the core of what they're like individually than the behaviors do.
So a D actually has emotion, and a C has emotion, I guess. Somewhere we can pull it out.
Oh, absolutely. Just go head to head with that D, and you'll see the emotion real quick.
I didn't know that.
Just tell it to see that they're wrong.
Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
And then you have the details, and you've got the answers. All of a sudden, you're going to see some pretty intense emotion from that.
That's why I want the clients to hear what you're saying, because we are so involved in our own personality style that we don't want to change. And I think, we got to be versatile. We've got to be, I always tell my clients that it's like playing poker. The D's and the I's basically want to walk in and say, here I am, this is who I am. So they're taking their cards and going like this. We got to play poker. Keep your cards in tight. Let them show their cards off. But the D's can't wait to come in hard. The I's can't wait to tell everyone. They're yelling from the parking lot, here I come, and they're coming into the home. I said, just let the client reveal their cards. So then we're looking at either verbal cues and nonverbal cues, and this is obnoxious, but I used to go up to houses. When I knew that the front lawn looked like Disney World, I would think that there's an eye in there somewhere, right? Yeah? And then if their lawn was perfectly straight in the driveway, and the guy came up to me with socks, and the foyer was clean, he's looking at his watch going, you're right on time. I go, man, we got a C in here. So let's look at what are some good cues that we can start to really pick up on so that we get better let's start off on the phone. Let's not even do it in person. What are some of the verbal cues we can pick up with each personality style?
Okay, there's a number of things that we can do. In fact, we go into this in our DiSC certification program. But one of the things listen to the pace of how quickly or how slowly the person is speaking. Okay, get a feel for what types of questions they're asking you. Say, what kind of questions do you have, or what is important to you? And all of a sudden, they'll start talking about different things. Well, it's important that we have good school systems because, or they might say, I homeschool, so that's not an issue for me. Well, that's telling me a whole bunch of stuff right away. I mean, if they're homeschooling, okay, what happens is they like to create the own structure. They like to be in control of things. Okay, it tells me from a particular motives standpoint, they're probably fairly theoretical, all right, because they like the pursuit of knowledge, and they're probably fairly individualistic because they feel that they have the answers for their kid and they want to control what happens for the kid. Right? That's fine. That's who they are, and that's what works for them. Right? So do that. Ask them. Give me a tour of your house on the phone. All right, and see how they present their house to you on the phone. I mean, that is a wealth of information. Okay, do they go room to room to room? Do they do it quickly, or do they go into the family room and talk about the pictures on the wall? Okay, and that type of thing. And I'll tell you, I really love this picture. Do they keep on track or do they get off track? Okay, if we're going to keep on track, all right, they're probably the D or the C. If they're going to get off track and they're going to get into emotional type stuff, they're going to be more the I, especially if they flit around from thing to thing to thing and it has emotionality to it. If they flit around in the very fast thing to thing to thing, it's probably more D type behavior. All right, so what happens is, and even if you don't want to put them into a DIS or C, topology or framework, right, you have tremendous information regarding how to interact with them. Okay, right. And the more cues like this you pick up, the more confidence you're going to have that you have the right behavioral style. After all, what do assessments do? What assessments do, what our DiSC does, is it looks at 24 different sets of 4 types of characteristics, how people describe themselves, and then asks them to rank order those 4 sets. It's cues.
Right.
Okay, it's information. And what's happening is the computer just knows what questions for them to answer and knows what the answers mean. Okay, so what you're doing with the same thing as telephone. I mean, at the introduction I said I ran a crisis center initially. Well, it was a call-in crisis center. We never saw people. We could tell what was going on from them from what was happening on the phone. And we actually trained them on how to pick up what was happening on the phone. It was incredible. And we became masters at it, and I wound up training our trainers, okay? Because you can get all kinds of incredible information just from the phone, but you gotta focus on them instead of focusing on you.
Yeah, and you know what? And that raises, and what the agents and the salespeople don't realize that, but by focusing on them, you have more control, but not obvious control. And the D's want to have control and show control, but what's happening here by asking the questions and letting them answer and hearing the way they're answering is really having more control than the obvious one and trying to close people. And I think that the consumer right now, and I'm telling this to all my clients now, the consumer has better techniques than we do, because they've been so technique for so many years that we've got to come across someplace different. The scripts all sound the same, basically, and the tie downs and some of these things that we're doing, the consumer knows. So there has to be another direction, and by the client's learning DiSC and studying it really gives you, I think, an unfair advantage to understanding how to work with the client. So, so now let's just say I want to learn more about being a DiSC, and you and I are working together so I can get certified, and I'm excited about that opportunity. So I'm a leader of a team. What do I need to know better than just the average DiSC? Where should I take my education on DiSC if I'm going to develop a big team?
Well, there's a couple ways that we can help you do that. Okay, one of them is our DiSC certification program, as well as our Motives certification program. Okay, and we basically have 2 levels there. One of them is to get certified, which is an online course, which is great. You don't have to travel anywhere.
Right.
It's a number of webinars, and you have a workbook with us that has a lot of experiential exercises. Okay, and it's spaced out so you can do the webinars at your own pace, and you can do them as often as you want. And we always recommend that you do the experiential exercises before you go on to the next webinar. That way it becomes more integrated into who you are as a person, and you're actually using it. So that's our certification program. We also have something called Mastery, and with Mastery, you either have to be in our DiSC certification or you have to have already completed the DiSC certification, and that is a day with me. Okay? And what happens is you come in a small group, and we just spend most of the day on cases. And you're going to be interacting with a couple other people in a small group. You'll work on a case. A couple of small groups will work on the same case. You'll come back to the larger group, share your information, what you came up with, okay, and then you'll get some additional insight from me. So the beauty of that is you get information from 1 or 2 other people that also is passionate about DiSC or knows DiSC,
right.
Okay? Then you come back and you hear how a couple other people interpreted the same situation with the graph or the DiSC wheel, okay, or the same thing with the motives, all right? And then I'm going to add further to it. So there's all kinds of great information and wealth, as well as you can now create different connections within that group. All right, we have 2 other programs that I'm really proud of. One is a program that we do with a master trainer, and they come out and they'll give a day program on how to figure out what your client is like without giving them the DiSC.
Got it.
Okay, so it's a very hands-on, very experiential learning opportunity. The third thing that we do is and I don't do coaching, so we're not going to be in competition, all right? But one of the things that I do is I will coach people on using our assessments, right? So, for example, let's say that you're a coach and you've got 20 or 30 clients, all right? Or you've got a fairly large team and you want to figure out how to deal with that team, or you're interacting with people in the environment and it'd be nice for you to understand how to work with them, right? Well, what I'll do is I'll say, okay, give me their DiSC behaviors assessment and give me their motives assessment, and we're going to spend some time, and you tell me what the issues are, and I'm going to tell you how to interact with them. I'm going to tell you how to work more effectively with them, okay? And it's really phenomenal, and I'll just give you an example. When I do this, in one situation, I was working with a manager, and he had to do a lot of recruiting, and he was having trouble recruiting some really, really successful people. Right. And he'd been trying to do this with a team, a husband and wife team, for several years, and within a month or so, they had already signed the paperwork and had come over to their organization. And how that happened was we did DiSCs and motives on both the husband and the wife. I told them how to interact more effectively with them, okay, and they did that, and after 2 or 3 meetings, all of a sudden they were connected, and what took him 2 or 3 years to do, he was doing in 2 or 3 meetings because he better understood what they were about as people. Okay, so that's another program that we have. I call it individual discovery.
Yeah, I love that.
Phenomenal program. And we also have a team discovery where what we'll do is we'll work with somebody either for an hour with their team or where everybody takes the individual online assessment, and then we have a team report for them, and then we'll do the same thing where I can actually come on site if there's a number of teams, or if they want me in person instead of just over the internet. Whatever our client wants, because you know I'm here to meet whatever their needs are.
Yeah, I love it. And you know, in my Power Prospecting, Matt, and Dr. Abelson, I'm actually going over DiSC and how to use it in a sales scenario. And there's one profile that I think is the one that actually fools people the most, drops their guard down, they don't even technique the person, and it's amazing to me because there's 3 profiles that you can probably technique, and there's one that you don't do it because they're so nice. They were just so nice to me. We had a kumbaya moment. I hugged, and he told me to call him back tomorrow because we loved you, you love me, and we love people, and they walk out. You technique everybody, no matter what personality style, and the S's are the ones that fool most salespeople because they have a kumbaya moment, which we talk about, and no one techniques it. Every personality style, if you leave an apartment and you do not have a technique to find out why you didn't get it, because here's what I asked my client. So how did it go yesterday? Oh, they love me. They love me.
I hate when that happens, truthfully.
Yeah. They love me, and we love them, and I love their dog and their cat. It was such a great experience. And I said, well, how do you think the presentation went? I think it went great because of that. Is that your opinion or theirs? Now, did you close? No, I didn't close. So that's my opinion, that the S's are the most dangerous style because everybody gets mesmerized. It's like what my coach used to call it years ago, my first coach, mutual mystification. No one has a clue what the hell just what happened.
Yeah. What is that, Dr. Abelson? What's the element of the S, or maybe there's something deeper in the motives that are behind that? What's your opinion on that?
Well, let me go back and make a comment on a comment that I made a moment ago, and that was I hate when that happens. Obviously, I love when they love me. Okay, you know, because that's a nice, warm feeling, and it's a really great feeling. And you feel like, wow, I've connected, and it's terrific, right? This is part of the mystique of the S. Okay, what happens is S's are very good at understanding other people. That's what they focus on. So while you're trying to figure out them, they've already figured you out. Okay, and they do it innately. Okay, it's just something that comes natural to them. All right, so you feel connected to them. And another mystique or aspect with the S is what happens is they're not very good with nonverbals, meaning they're very good with nonverbals, and it's kind of hard to figure out from their nonverbals where they are. So what happens is people focus on what they say instead of the nonverbals. And we know that most of communication comes from nonverbals. So you're focusing on the on what they said, but what's happening with the S's are all kinds of nonverbals that are going on inside that you're not seeing.
Right.
Okay. So let's get to let's get to how to interact with the S. So when you have that kumbaya moment, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. Or when people you're coaching have that kumbaya moment. All right. Get into it and enjoy it. Nothing wrong with the kumbaya moment.
Experience it.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Now, this is what you do next. What is our next step? Yep. Okay. What do we do next? Okay. And when can we talk next? And when are you willing and able to make a decision? Or what else do you need for me to make a decision? So what happens is you get more back into the type of D type of thing, but you do it in a very relaxed and non-competitive and non-forceful way, because that's the best way to connect with the S.
Right.
All right. But S is like processes. All right, so what you want to do is you want to create a process with them and get buy-in from them as to what the process is, and the best way to get buy-in is to ask them, what is next? Okay, and don't let them escape.
Right.
Don't let them get back to the kumbaya moment.
Yeah, we loved you. No.
We'll figure something out. We really like you. Okay?
We'll hug more.
That makes me feel good that you like me, and I feel great about this, and I'm really feeling good about our relationship. But what is our next step?
Okay. All right, so here, Matt, can I take a second and do the close? Here's a free gift to all my clients for the S's, okay? Here we go. So the S's they loved you, you did a presentation. We loved you. You're great, Bill, no problem. So we'll call you tomorrow because we both loved you very much. And you go, your tail's wagging, things are going great. So you didn't do your questions like Dr. Abelson, so you leave, right? So here's what I'm suggesting to my clients, that in every personality style, no matter what it is, so you're safe. So great, thanks for letting me come by. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 you really liked everything that I had to say, and 1 you didn't like it. Where are we? Okay, I love this one. So they go 9. Look, the S's are cool. They're still going to work you. Yo, Bill, you were a 9. I love you, man. You were great. Oh, well, listen, thank you. So now we got to go to the next step, because if you leave when they give you a 9 and you're thinking you're going to get it, you're not going to get it, or you better know that you're going to get it. So let me ask you this. First of all, thanks for giving me a 9. I'm a little concerned, though, because when I get a 9, people typically, watch this, sign right now.
Great.
Okay, so usually it's one of 3 things. A, you didn't like the price that I set on the house, but with a big smile on my head. Or B, something about my marketing you didn't like. Or C, you're thinking about doing something else. Which one are you? Okay, big smile, your gold teeth is hanging out, because we cannot let these people technique us, and what's happening, the nice people are out-techniquing us because we have no technique. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, and what you're doing there is, again, you're being much more directive as you would expect a D to do, because you're interactive as you're being directive, which is more of a D-type behavior, which is fine. You just want to remember when you're acting with somebody who creates that kumbaya moment that you want to stay in the kumbaya, but you don't want to get duped by the kumbaya.
So maybe hold their hand while I'm talking and closing them. Just hold their hand and go, I really enjoy myself.
Because they might not want to hold your hand.
Yeah, that's right. Right. So I think that the key thing here is that the more that we know DiSC, gosh, can that help you so much in your presentation skills, your closing skills, and you know what I've learned also, why we don't get along with certain personality styles, because as you said, the D is directly opposite the S, right? The I and the C. So if we know we're coming into that type of moment, we have to adjust before we go in, correct?
Yes, and let me make a couple comments related to that. All right, you might know or figure out what the person is ahead of time. It might be, if we're talking about homes, okay, it might be 2 people involved in it that have different behavioral styles, which is not that unusual. Okay, so you might want to go with somebody else to the presentation and not just go yourself. Okay, and that way you can have a more of a type of relationship going on with them. Okay, the other aspect of it is to make sure that no matter what their behavioral style is you have those next steps, and you stick true to what you want to do. It's interesting. When a D interacts with a D, it's interesting when I'll go on some quote unquote sales calls. Okay, and the person's the salesperson, and they'll say to me, "Man, I really love that close." Okay, and then they give me that feedback, and I smile and I said, "Well, then how do we close it then? What is the deal?" And then we get back to the types of things that you were talking about. But it's important to realize what their style is, what the fit is, and it's okay to be a little bit more D-ish, to deal with the goals, okay? But whenever you're couching those goals, put it back on them and their style. I really want to help you. I really want to get the best price for your house. I want to make sure that the right people are in your house, because if they're an S, they just don't want to sell it to anybody.
Right.
Okay, so there's other issues going on, so you want to play to their style. If it's a D, you want to get the best price, and you just want to get them in and get them out, and you want to have as few people as possible come and look at your house. So we need to come up with a plan for that, and the sooner that we can get started, the better off we're going to be, because the sooner we're going to sell your house, and you can move on to where you want to move next, and I can help you find another house. Okay, yada, yada, yada. So whatever your close is, you need to remember what their general style is, and then go with that. And if there's two people, they might have two different styles. So make sure you look to the right person when you're talking with them, okay, and talk to that person's style. It slays me to watch people when they think that either the man or the woman, okay, are the ones making the decision, and then they only look at that person.
Right.
Okay, and then they leave, and it's kind of like it's the other person who's making the decision, or they're both making the decision. Okay, so it's important to realize, again, you want to match, you want to figure out basically, and don't jump to conclusions, okay, and don't think that all D's or I's or S's or C's are alike. They're not. There's different aspects or intensities that go with that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump in. We've got a question from the audience I want to make sure we get to. So Sandy Williams asked, with regards to the C seller, and Bill, this might be a good question for you because it's about scripting.
Yep.
Is there a way to use their nice in our favor? So she gives an example of the phrasing. Say, since we really like each other, can we agree to do business together and move forward? Like, what do you think about that script?
Is that a C or is that an S?
With regards to a C seller.
A C seller. C's don't really like people, do they, Dr. Abelson? I mean, they do like people, but C's do C's talk that way? You think?
Well, let's get to what the person is asking, and let's talk more about that. I mean, what it seems to me is this is a C with some S.
Yeah.
Okay. Because there is this relationship aspect, okay, of what's going on. So they might be, a little bit further, down on the C and the S is coming up. Right. Or, excuse me, on the C. So what we might want to do in that particular case is, again, specifically this is what we do specifically next in our process. Okay, We're going to go through the contract. We're going to see what questions you have. We're going to answer all these questions that fill in all these spaces. So I have a contract here. All right. So how about us looking at the contract now and seeing how you want me to fill in these spaces, or how you would like to fill in the spaces. Okay. So you're going back to the detail. So
it's almost we're doing a little future pacing too, with the client a little bit too. So remember this, in my opinion, with the C's, when you're closing the C's, like you listen to the words that Dr. Abelson used specifically. They're more precise words. I think the key is that three things need to happen in an appointment. Either you're going to either get a signature, or you set another date to come back, or the worst thing that could happen is you set a phone appointment. But to leave an appointment without anything set up is you have been out-techniqued by someone. And that really hurts the salespeople when they feel that a layperson has just out-techniqued them because they have no technique. So every personality style, you're going to have to come up with a signature, a second appointment, or a phone appointment to come back. Never leave with, I'll just call you. And then that'll
let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Is there a point where you just let somebody go and say, this isn't going to happen, I'm not going to get this contract, they're not going to work with me, and just move on? Is there a point of diminishing returns?
Yeah, I think that, but what we're attempting to do more of is to do that over the phone by what you said, by the verbal cues. If we can eliminate that meeting, we found out that it costs you around $1,000 of hard money when you go out to an appointment that you don't get,
right? Based
on time and all that. So we could avoid that and do more pre-qualifying prior to the appointment. But let's just say you're at the house. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. If they're just not motivated for this type of marketplace that we're in, and they're not answering the questions right, and some of them are very rude, and you get a choice to work with who you want to work with. I think that sometimes we feel obligated to work with anybody. I know we're running short of time, Matt. How are we doing?
We can stop now. We've got a couple minutes. We can overrun, which is fine. And Sandy did point out maybe it was the S that she was referring to.
Yeah, that's
so
what
which I think we dealt with that. We kind of got into both how to deal with the S and the C, which is fantastic. So yeah, that's all the questions we have from the audience for now, guys. So I want to make sure we give a really good plug to Dr. Abelson. I'm actually going to put the links to your website and the certifications and the programs that you mentioned, Doctor, in the notes on the page so that people can find you and check that out, because that sounds phenomenal. I mean, that's a great place to start.
Yeah. Yeah, it's excellent, and I'm excited about working closer with Dr. Abelson too. We're going to be doing some other classes together, and we're looking to do more business together. So I'm excited about that, and I'm excited about what's coming up here with things that we're doing. So if you got any questions, you go to my website if you like. Email me at billcrespo@verizon.net. I want to say thanks to Matt and thanks to Dr. Abelson. I'm looking forward to seeing him soon. So with that, I guess we're done.
We're done. All right, well, thank you, Bill, and thanks for this opportunity, and thanks, Matt, and hopefully the people who are watching this have gotten some really good information, and please let us know how we can help you be more successful.
Perfect.
Excellent. Thanks so much, guys.
Appreciate it.